Hello and welcome. I'm Elaine Canyon, sweetly writing happily ever after, one book at a time. And in this video, we're building your cover design toolbox. I am so excited to start this new series. This series is going to help you build a toolbox for cover designing. We're going to talk about, in this video specifically, the 11 principles of design and how they can help you create better covers, whether you're creating them on your own or you're working with a cover designer. As the series continues, we'll be adding more tools to your toolbox so that your covers can really shine and do exactly what they're meant to do. Because cover design is not specifically art. There is a lot of art that goes into cover design. And there's something really important about having a beautiful cover. But first and foremost, a cover is a marketing tool. Your cover is what you are using to sell your book. And that part of graphic design is less about the art and more about doing a job. Your cover design is a tool. And if the tool is not working, then it needs to be fixed. These 11 principles of design are going to help make sure that your covers are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So let's get started. I'm not going to be going into a ton of in-depth detail on each of these 11 principles. I'm going to give you a basic definition, and then I'll link below in the description other videos that you can go watch that do a better deep dive into what each of these is if you want to geek out on the design side of it. But what I'm going to tell you is just going to be enough for you to understand when you're looking at a cover whether or not something works and why it is or is not working. Also, these principles are going to overlap with each other. I'm not giving you these principles in an order that is most important to least important, or this first, then that. These principles essentially work like a web. They intersect and build off of each other. They support each other and keep the others standing up to be able to do exactly what the cover is meant to do. So keep that in mind. We're going to be going back and forth between a lot of these as we talk about them. Now, to go through and show you these 11 principles of design, I might have found one book cover to rule them all. I really think I might have. I adore this book cover. I'm going to put it up on the screen. It'll stay up here while we talk. S.L. Prater wrote a book called Court of Tricksters, and St. Jupiter is who designed the cover for her. This is an absolutely gorgeous, 100% beautiful cover that I adore. Like I'm at a loss for words for how good this cover is. And as we go through these 11 principles of design, this book cover is what I'm going to use to show you all of them because it just does it so well. I'm going to link St. Jupiter and S.L. Prater and the link for Court of Tricksters down below in the comments. Go check out all of them. I haven't read this book yet. It's on my TBR. It looks really cute. Go check out St. Jupiter. Her covers are really pretty and she does a good job. This just might be her piece de resistance. Like, this is everything that I've ever wanted to see in a book cover done really, really well. And book covers, my background is in graphic design, specifically vector design and illustration. And I can't tell you how many book covers I've seen that I just look at it and I go, oh, if you had just done this or just done that. And it's just sad. I can't find anything wrong with this book cover that I don't like. I think it's fabulous and perfect. And we're going to talk about why using these 11 principles of design. So let's get started. The first principle we're going to talk about is balance. Balance is creating stability in your design. So in this cover, we see balance done in a few ways. One of the ways we see it done is symmetry. The frame that St. Jupiter has put around this cover is balanced because it's symmetrical. If I fold this book cover in half, every element in that frame is going to line up perfectly. You also see balance in the silhouette of both characters. His cape comes down off to the right, and as it comes down, it gets wider and bigger. And then her hair does the same thing, but her hair comes up a little bit. A lot of the tendrils come up first before they curve down to follow gravity. And so you have this really beautiful balance going on with her hair and his cape, and it almost creates a circle, which balances with the radial gradient she's put behind the title. The radial gradient, if you look at the cover, you'll see how it starts kind of white in the center, and then it sunbursts out almost, and it gets bluer and bluer and bluer and bluer until we hit that light blue that the rest of the cover has. That is called a radial gradient. I'll try to remember to define terms as I go. If I don't define a term, hit me down below in the comments and tell me, hey, you said this and you never explained it. I will come down in the comments and I will explain what it means. The next principle that we're going to talk about is unity. Unity is the harmony or the relationship between all of your design elements, specifically that they're coming together well. And we'll talk about harmony a little bit later in the video. That has its own section. But the unity is just that everything fits, that everything relates to itself and focuses on that most important element. So we can see unity here in how St. Jupiter has only actually picked 2 colors, but she's used hues along both of those colors. So we have light blue all the way to dark blue, and we have light gold all the way to a dark gold that's almost a brown. And using those hues instead of a ton of different colors creates a lot of unity. It brings everything together so that it's related well to each other. There's only actually 2 colors here, but because there's so many hues, your eye doesn't notice that there's really only 2 colors. And we don't get all of the contrast and craziness that comes when you put a rainbow into a book cover, or any design for that matter. That can get really hard to handle really fast unless it is the whole point you're doing it. If your whole reason for doing the design is to have a ton of color in there, then it can be done. But when you're just adding colors in at random, it gets really difficult. So choosing 2 colors and only doing the hues of those colors creates unity while giving this sense that everything has its own color. We see that unity too in how she has the radial gradient in the center, and then she has almost a circle that she's created with the couple. So the circles help to add balance, and they help to draw the reader into the center and make it so that nothing looks out of place. If we had taken the silhouette of the couple and had dropped his cape down flat, it would feel off balance, and it wouldn't feel, and that radial gradient in the center would be really distracting. But because she's made the circle, or the semblance of a circle, using the silhouette, our eye isn't drawn to that radial gradient in a way that it shouldn't be. All that radial gradient does is add emphasis where it's supposed to, instead of distracting you from reading the title and looking at the silhouette of the characters, which is exactly what is most important in this book cover. Contrast is the next principle that we're going to talk about. Contrast is the difference between the elements in your design, and you can use those to help you create hierarchy. In this book cover, St. Jupiter has put the most important things in dark blue and the least important things in her varying golds. So her brightest golds are the most important because they contrast directly with the dark blue. The antlers coming out of the male silhouette, or the crown going across the female silhouette. Those are the brightest gold contrasting with the darkest blue. But all of her other golds are up and off to the side and away, because they're not as important. And so our eye is naturally drawn to those darker colors because everything else is pulled away from them. And that's a really good use of contrast because it emphasizes what we need to be focusing on. It draws our eye directly where it needs to be. And it communicates things about the story too. Bright gold antlers coming out of a really dark blue head tell me immediately that this is not a story about a human being. This is a story about a fae because he's got antlers coming out of his head. The same with the gold crown going across the female character's head. It tells me that we're dealing with, like the title suggests, a court. There is going to be some form of royalty played into this. Contrast can be used for our next principle, and that's adding emphasis. Emphasis is a strategy to push the viewer through the design in a very specific way. So here, St. Jupiter is using the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is where we break our design piece into 3 equal sections. The eye will naturally hit from top to bottom. Now, you don't necessarily want your most important thing to be up at the top of a design where it can be cut off. You want whatever is going to be up at the top of the design to be something that can cut off and it not be a big deal. And so what St. Jupiter has done here, which is just a really good use of design in general, is that she's used the rule of thirds and she's put court as the biggest word on this book cover, period. And she's put it at the bottom top third. That is where your eye is immediately going to go, and it tricks the brain into saying, well, I did start at the top. So your brain doesn't go to the top and scan all the way down. Your brain goes exactly where St. Jupiter wants your eye to be, and that's at the word court, at the top, at the bottom part of the top third. Then she puts of tricksters in the top part of the middle third. So both of these words, of and tricksters, is smaller than court is. And it's that way for a reason, because in the bottom part of the middle third, she puts the heads, she puts the faces of the silhouettes. So your brain naturally wants to read, and when it's done reading, it will stop unless you have something of emphasis to pull the eye the rest of the way down. Because if your brain doesn't register there's more words, your brain will move. And so what we're doing is we're guiding the brain and we're saying, oh, no. The next best thing to words is a human face. And so now your brain sees a face, sees two faces even looking at each other. And that is going to pull you through the rest of the book cover. And so St. Jupiter has done an amazing job of guiding your eye, starting with the title, guiding you through the title, and then catching you with the faces here at the center, and then pulling you down the rest of the way through the book cover. And she's done that with a lot of things, but one of the ways she's done that is emphasis and using the rule of thirds here. Our next principle is repetition. Repetition is exactly what it sounds like, repeating the same element throughout the design. So you can see that in the little header and footer of the sunburst and the curly cues that come out of it. That is a repetition. And what that does is it serves to help frame the top and the bottom, because if you take a minute to step back from this cover and look at it, the gold fleur-de-lis leaves actually don't come all the way to the center. They get cut off, and they get cut off on purpose. We're going to talk about why in a little bit in one of our next principles. But by having them cut off, it can open up that top and the bottom and make it feel like the cover is sort of coming apart at the top and bottom seam. And we don't want it to feel that way. So what St. Jupiter has done is she's created a frame for the top and the bottom that locks it in, because she's already got the frame on the edges with those fleur-de-lis leaves that are coming off of the sides. And so she's framed in the sides, she's brought her eyes in, and now she needs to bring her eyes in from the top and the bottom. And she does that with that sunburst and the swirls off the side of it. They lock us in and they give us that frame that draws our eye in. Now you obviously don't need a frame in every book cover, but you do need to do something to help draw the eye into those most important places. And this is what St. Jupiter has done. She's used repetition to be able to draw it in. When you're using repetition of multiple elements, that's called pattern. A pattern is exactly that, repeating a set of elements throughout the design. And that either enhances the design or it adds emphasis where you want the emphasis added. So that's what that outside part, so that's what those sides of our frame are. Those fleur-de-lis leaves are a repeating pattern all the way through on both sides. We have the curls up at the top corners that help frame our corners and bring us in, and they're the exact same on all four corners. And then the little curly cues that are on the edges are also on the top and bottom. And that pattern helps to frame us and bring us in and focus us on the most important part of this design, which is the title and the couple at the bottom. Our next design element is rhythm. Rhythm is the visual tempo of those repeating elements that you have, whether that's your pattern or whether that's just your repetition. That visual tempo can create movement. If you've ever looked at a design, whether it be a book cover or something else, and thought, this is really busy and I can't focus on anything, that usually means that the rhythm is too much. It's too fast. Things are too close together, or they're repeated too consistently or too much. And then the same applies for the opposite. If you've seen something that just looked really blank to you, it probably is because the rhythm was too slow. There wasn't enough repetition or pattern to draw your eye in, and your eye just skimmed right over it because there was nothing to catch it. So my favorite rhythm in this book cover is the forest inside the silhouettes. It is done so well. The pattern inside the forest is the hues of blue, going from those dark blues to a slightly lighter blue. Doesn't ever actually go to the same blue that the background is, but it goes close, goes a little more muted than that. And those trees are full tree trunks, and they're consistently repeated all the way through. And it creates just this really amazing depth, and it makes those silhouettes more than silhouettes. It adds intrigue to it and emphasis on them. You can see rhythm as well in the tree branches that are scattered everywhere throughout this cover, inside that frame that she's created around the court of tricksters and the couple at the bottom. Those tree branches are all basically the same branch. They're a repeating element through the cover, and they add a lot of depth, and they help to make the frame around the title and the cover just busy enough that it can fade into the background for you and focus you on the title and the couple at the bottom. Rhythm is one of the ways that we create the next principle, and that is movement. Movement is the path that your eyes are going to take through a design and how your elements are directing that. So we want the most important thing to come first. And in this design, that is the title. That is the first thing that they want, that St. Jupiter wants you to see. And she does that by making it the biggest word on the title. And then the couple is the next thing that she wants you to see. And so that is the biggest thing on the cover. So between the title and the couple, those are the two big things that you're going to focus on, and you're going to move through them. You're going to start with Court of Tricksters, because not only is it in the top third, like we talked about, so it's tricking your eyes into thinking that it started at the top and moving down, but it's the biggest word on there. No other word on this title is bigger than court. Of, interestingly enough, is one of the smaller words. And to ensure that you don't miss it, because Court of Tricksters and Court Tricksters are two very different titles and have two very different meanings, she has used the tail of the C to draw your eye not only across the word court, but also down to the O in of. You cannot miss the word of. You start with the C, you come down, and there's of, because the C brought you to the word. It's a genius use of typography, and it's a great use of movement in typography. We've brought the C down so that you see the word of, and then you read Court of Tricksters. Next, we're going to talk about harmony. Now, we've mentioned harmony already a couple times, like when we've talked about unity, but what harmony is specifically is it's the cohesiveness between the elements. So in unity, we talked about how it was all of the elements work together in harmony to put emphasis on the most important thing. Here, we're going to talk about harmony specifically. And the best way that I know to talk about harmony is actually to shift out of design and into music. Most people understand that in harmony, you have what the main singer sings and the music that plays in the background. The music playing in the background is the harmony, and the lead singer is the melody. So in our design, we're going to take that same concept, and yes, I understand that music is far more complex. I am a trained singer, I get that. But in design, we're going to break it down to its simplest form. The lead singer is our melody, everything behind them is harmony. So in our book cover design, our melody is our title and the silhouette of the two characters at the bottom. That's what St. Jupiter wants you to be focusing on. That's her melody. Everything else around it is harmony. The frame that goes around the edges with those fleur-de-lis leaves and the swirls and all of that, that's melody. The sword in the U and the gear in the S of Court and Tricksters, that's harmony. The forest that goes through our main couple, that is harmony. All of those things are drawing your eye in to the most important parts of the design. Their whole purpose is to direct you to focus on the melody and do it in a way that is not distracting. Proportion is one of the ways that we can create harmony. So proportion, our next element, is the unity, balance, and harmony in the relationship between all of the elements of design using size to add emphasis. So we talked about this before. The biggest things on this book cover are Court of Tricksters and the couple at the bottom. And so we've added emphasis with proportion. And then the things that are less important fade off into the background. If you look at this book cover and get really close into it, you're going to see that there's so much going on in the frame that she's made and in the background to add depth, but none of that is bigger than our title and our couple. And all of it is done in a way that does not detract from the title or the couple. All of that adds depth and is smaller, so it does not take away from the two most important things. The last thing we're going to talk about is variety. Variety creates contrast and tension. We talked about in the beginning how St. Jupiter actually uses two colors in this entire book cover. She uses blue and she uses gold. Blue and gold are almost opposites on the color wheel. It's actually blue and orange. So we're off just a little bit on opposites, but that's a good thing because it softens. If you go direct opposites, it's going to be hard. It is very noticeable and your eye sees it. And so what SL Jupiter has done is she's come off of that a little bit. So she's not in direct contrast, but it's enough contrast to add tension in that it pulls your eye in. The forest inside the silhouetted couple also adds contrast because it's tree trunks in comparison to the tree branches that are everywhere around it. So everywhere else going around this book cover, we have just these individual branches, a lot like the antlers that are coming out of the Duke's head on the silhouette. But inside, the pattern that St. Jupiter has put is tree trunks. And so that adds a level of depth to it, but it also adds a contrasting element so that we're more drawn to that. Because these branches just kind of go everywhere, and that's fine, they go everywhere. But they don't draw us in the way that those tree trunks do. A trunk grounds you and gives the feeling of weightier things than a tree branch does, because a tree branch is small and minimal and it's not a big deal. But that trunk feels very grounding because that's what a forest is. A tree planted in the ground is going to give you that feeling. And so she grounds us with that contrast. It's done really, really, really well. And it's just... So those are all 11 elements of design. I will put a list down in the bottom so that you can just see them listed out and remember them. And write them down if you want to. That's a great thing to do to help emphasize what we've learned here today and how it can apply to helping you create better book covers. What all of these principles do in a book cover is they communicate to your viewer. A good book cover is going to communicate the genre. This one by St. Jupiter does a fantastic job. Not only does she lead you through the book cover perfectly, but it tells me immediately, with the silhouetted couple looking into each other's eyes, that we have a romance novel. I know 100% this is romance. I also know it's fantasy because the main character, the male main character, has antlers coming out the top of his head. That is not something that happens in the human world. I know that this is a fantasy thing. And then when you look at the silhouette of the woman, she has got a crown going over the top of her head in gold. That tells me that we're working with a royal of some sort, whether it's a lord or a duke or a king. I don't know yet, but I know just looking at this cover that I have a romance, that I have a fantasy romance, and that I have a royalty fantasy romance. And then you can read it and you read Court of Tricksters and you see again, oh, I am in a court of some sort. And then Tricksters is playing off of Fae. And so if you're familiar with Fae, now you've identified it. Not only does the male main character have antlers growing out of his head, we've used the word tricksters. And tricksters are associated with the Fae. If you read in fantasy romance, that's something that you're aware of. If you don't read in fantasy romance, now you have a feel for what's coming. This book cover also does a great job because it draws your eye into those most important things. And that's what every book cover should do. It should draw the eye of the viewer into what is selling your book. And what's selling your book should theoretically be your title and something that emphasizes what they can expect. Like in this one, the romance. A good book cover should draw the eye to what's most important. This does a great job because what's most important is the genre and the title, and St. Jupiter's book cover does exactly that. She draws your eye to S.L. Prater's title. She draws it to something that communicates the genre clearly and effectively. And it's easy to tell whether or not you want to read this book. I want to read this book. This is right up my alley. This is fantasy romance. It has a touch of royalty to it, and it's going to have fae in it. This is awesome. And it helps that the book cover is just gorgeous. Good design should look good. It should be appealing in whatever way it needs to be. So if you're writing thriller, if you're writing horror, it's not going to be sparkle pretty roses. That definitely is not what you're going for. But it still needs to look appealing to your audience. So what looks appealing to the horror genre is not appealing to me. And that's a good thing, because I don't want to read your horror genre. I'm not going to leave you a good review if I'm the one who picks up your book. I might not even finish it. I actually won't. I won't finish it. I tell you that right now. So you want your book to communicate that. If someone's only reading horror and they're not reading fantasy romance, they can tell by looking at this cover that they don't want to pick it up. And that's a good thing. That's effective communication, effective marketing. And I just love that this cover does it beautifully. This cover is absolutely gorgeous. I run out of words when I try to talk about how much I love this cover, how well St. Jupiter did at creating something absolutely stunning that does its job so well. It's amazing. I'm in awe and I love it. Do you have a book cover that you love as much as I love this one? I would love to hear about it down in the comments. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos where I help you build your cover design toolbox, hit that subscribe button. I post videos on Wednesdays about cover design, discovery writing, and self-publishing on a teeny tiny budget. I hope to see you again soon.